All right, hi, thanks for having me. Thanks, Luge, for the introduction. Go back one. So I just realised when I was putting this together that missing in agriculture is actually probably not super accurate. They're actually not in agriculture, that's the problem. They're missing from agriculture, but I think MIA works better than MFA, so you'll have to forgive me for that. So I want to talk about three kind of key areas today. The first one being what is the problem in ag education, particularly amongst metropolitan students, which is my forte. I want to talk to you about what we've done at Barker, and I want to talk to you about what I think are the ways forward for Australia. And I want to emphasise that my specialty and my experience really is in metropolitan students. Maybe there's stuff to take out of there for regional and rural students, but I've only taught and been a metropolitan student myself. So those are the things I want to talk about today. So just briefly about me, I grew up in Sydney. I still live in Sydney. I live on the Northern Beaches. Love it. You know, probably will live there most of my life, maybe. Who knows? We'll see what happens. I had no connection to agriculture at all growing up. Never been on a farm or anything like that. I did agriculture at school because it was compulsory in year 7 and 8. And I'd like to acknowledge Tony Turner, who was one of my ag teachers at school, who kind of inspired me. He's here today. He's now at King's School in Sydney. And he inspired me to keep going in agriculture and kept doing it up until year 12, and then went to Sydney Uni and did ag science and ended up doing a teaching degree. Started out at Barker College, and Ali Arnott, who is the head of ag at Barker at that time, is now working for PIEFA, and she's also here today. And so I'd like to acknowledge her and talk a bit about what she initially did to turn around at Barker as well before I took over from her. And then I'm still at Barker. I've been there for 13 years. And I'm now undertaking a PhD part-time in ag education. And one of my supervisors, my main supervisor, Professor Jim Prattley, who's speaking later today, is also here. I'd like to acknowledge him. He's the guru in ag education in Australia, and I spoke to him a few years ago when I was interested in doing a PhD, and he offered to be my supervisor. I'm incredibly thankful for that still. So some of this stuff today is a bit of a combination between what we've done at school and stuff from my PhD. So I think the first bit about what do we know, what are the problems in Australia, most people in this room know this. We really need to double our food production in the world. We need to deal with climate change. We have all the tech adaptation, which Fraser was just talking about. We're probably all well aware that there's a $100 billion target for Australian agriculture over the next few years, $100 billion per year. Maybe we were also aware, and probably hear later today, that there's about 6 jobs per graduate out of university ag degrees. And again, that's Professor Prattley's work there in that, and the Australian Council of Deans of Agriculture. What's not so well known is that out of those university jobs that students get out of university, around 30% of them are on farm, 40 to 50% are kind of off farm but rural regional, and about 20 to 30% at least are based in cities. And a lot of people, most urban people have no idea about that. And so that's really an issue. The other problems are that in a metropolitan student or metropolitan person context, agriculture simply equals farming. And at school, agriculture is seen as a bludge subject, which we'll talk about in a sec. And so, therefore, metropolitan students do not see themselves, they don't see themselves as farmers because they didn't grow up on a farm, they're not going to own a farm, they're not going to get handed a farm. And so, therefore, they don't see any future in the sector for themselves. But over that time, or over the past 15 years or so, the enrolments in ag at Barker, when Ali started as head of department, Ali Arnott, from about, I think, 2007, when agriculture was almost closed down by the school because it had, about 10 or 12 students per year group from year 9 to 12. It wasn't really viable. And so over that time, Ali turned it around, and we'll talk about that in a sec. And then I started in 2010 and took over as head of department in around about 2014. And so we've gone up to this year 420 students doing agriculture in year 9 to 12. We've got 23 classes and 7 teachers. And so prior to Ali's turning it around, before its near-death experience, we were showing animals, which is pretty typical. Mostly it was boarders doing the subject from country or regional areas, and it was seen as a bit of a bludge subject. And I think part of what Ali started and then we've carried on is it's now seen as a science in the same way that biology or chemistry or physics is science. We really emphasise the metropolitan careers, which I'll talk about in a sec. We're very future focused, and so you've heard a little bit about that from Fraser, and I believe yesterday from Michael, which I missed unfortunately, but I believe that was one of the quotes I saw on the social media, and which is really good to see. And now, out of our 420 students doing agriculture, only about 8 are boarders from the country. And so we are, if you don't know where Barker College is, which is probably most people, but this is Sydney. Where the word Sydney is where the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge is, and then Barker's up where the arrow is, up the North Shore, kind of the north of the North Shore. And so all of our students really come from either the North Shore or the Northern Beaches. And the Northern Beaches is off to the right there. And this is a kind of aerial photo of the school, looking towards the city in the background. And it looks a bit leafy, like the leafy North Shore, but actually the photo on the right shows like a view from pretty much my office, which is like high rises, and we've got veggie pods on the roof there. So it's thoroughly urban, and the students that we have all come from the North Shore, Northern Beaches. They're about as metropolitan as it gets in Australia. And so if we step back for a second and have a look at Year 12 enrolments in agriculture in New South Wales, this is looking from 1990 till around about now. And the enrolments, the students graduating from an agriculture course in New South Wales has gone from around about 2,500 to a pretty consistent 1,500 sitting the HSC completion exam in Year 12 in New South Wales each year. And you've got to keep in mind here that the population of New South Wales in 1990 was 3.5 million, and it's now 8.2 million. And so not only has the population more than doubled, but the numbers doing ag has significantly decreased. So that's all going in the wrong way. So it's pretty bad. But you might think, wow, that's pretty bad. But New South Wales is doing the best in the country. So this is, newly graphed data from a paper that I'm about to publish as part of my PhD. And it shows the number of Year 12 students in Australia in each state graduating from either agriculture or horticulture courses. And I've graphed it per million of population in that state. So you can see that New South Wales is consistently up the top. And Queensland's doing pretty well up there as well. And South Australia, there's kind of a grouping, which you'll notice. And then there's another grouping, unfortunately, down the bottom. And so Victoria, Tasmania and Western Australia are kind of sitting down there in the 40, 50 students per million people in the state graduating each year from Year 12. If you then graph it by how many, the state agricultural production, so I've graphed the number of students completing Year 12 in each state by the $1 billion of agricultural production in that state. And so again, New South Wales, New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland are often producing a similar number of dollar figure of production each year. Sometimes Victoria's number one, some years Queensland's number one. But per, students per $1 billion of production, New South Wales is again at the top, Queensland and then South Australia, there's a bit of a grouping there, and then another grouping down the bottom with the other states. So there's a significant issue and I guess underinvestment in agriculture relative to population and production. If we have a look at university, both intake, and then graduates, this is the past couple of decades of agriculture course intakes and graduates in all Australian universities. And so you can see there was, in 2001, around about 2,500 students going into agriculture-related courses, and then we have about 1,200 or so graduating. And in the last handful of years, that's dropped down to around about 1,500 students going into agriculture courses, and somewhere around the 600 to 700-ish mark of students graduating in Australia each year, which is very low. And so what I've then done is put this obviously people do university in different states, they might move and that kind of thing, but this is showing how many more students or how many % more students are graduating in each state compared to the population share. So New South Wales universities are graduating about 5% more ag graduates from ag degrees than their population share. Victoria obviously is about 3% under population share, Queensland's a bit lower, South Australia is doing well there, and then Tasmania much lower. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. A lot of things you could unpack from that alone, but it just gives you an idea about how many graduates are coming out of universities in each state compared to population share. And so what does agriculture in schools actually look like? Well, I think in a metropolitan context, which is what I'm talking about here, is that agriculture equals being a farmer. And you hear the non-ag kids often say in schools, why are you doing ag if you're not going to be, are you going to be a farmer? It's a common refrain that they talk to each other or ask each other about. And so I think in a lot of cases, in many schools that are teaching ag, you could probably get up at subject selection night and say, don't choose ag, and you probably get the same number of students doing ag. They're kind of the rusted on ones that are going to do it anyway. They've decided they're going to do it despite the peer pressure not to do it in a metropolitan context. And so a lot of schools also show animals, and I think there's nothing wrong with that in a sense, but what gets promoted about agriculture, what gets published on the school's Facebook page, what do the non-agriculture students think agriculture is? And I can tell you most of them think in many schools that it's just showing animals, and that's only a few letters of the alphabet. That's the problem, and we want to teach agricultural literacy, but we're only teaching a few letters of the alphabet, or that's the perception amongst the majority of students. And so if they can't see themselves owning a farm, being a farmer, why would they want to do something that is just showing animals, if that's what their perception is? And so I think in a lot of ways, maybe agriculture in some senses represents what agriculture was like in the past, not the present, and certainly not the future. And I think the future is really important. And as I mentioned, metropolitan kids don't see themselves in the farmer stereotype. And so I want to talk about that a bit more in a second. And generally speaking, if they can't see it, they can't be it. There's exceptions to that, but that's the majority of the case. And so back to Barker briefly, we've got about a third of each year group doing agriculture. So out of our 420, year 9, there's about 105, 106 this year. Year 10's 125. Year 11's 110 and Year 12's 80. We usually have somewhere between 80 to 100 doing it in Year 12 each year for the HSC. And so, it's about a third or a quarter of each year group in the school. And these are all North Shore and Northern Beaches metropolitan kids that are doing it. And so, I guess, what have we changed? It's worth talking to Ali Arnott at PIEFA as well as me, because she kind of began this and we've carried it on. But we've changed it to make agriculture as a science in the same way as biology and chemistry. We have a really kind of rigorous academic focus. We really promote, we like to get good HSC results and hopefully keep doing that. And we promote that back to students and say, you can actually do well in agriculture academically. I want to point out this ag tech map while I think about it on the right-hand side. This is super powerful. You might have seen this before, but it's the Australian Agritech Food Map. It's got all these companies that are in ag tech in Australia, and many of them are based in cities, and many of them are in Sydney. They're in North Sydney, they're in Surrey Hills, which is right in the centre of Sydney. And when you say that to kids and say, hey, you could be working for these companies, and we've got about probably 10 students working for about 5 of these companies already, past students, and students have actually chosen ag because of that. We promote that at curriculum night. We've also stopped showing animals a long time ago for a number of reasons, but I think we'll certainly never bring it back. And we're really trying to appeal to all students. We're not trying to appeal to the ones that are already going to choose ag. They're already going to choose ag. We want to appeal to all the other ones that maybe are not going to choose ag. How do we get them in? And I think making it relevant for the students that we have, they're going to be, they're consumers. We're all consumers, but they're going to be, metropolitan people their whole life, no doubt, most of them. And so we do things on coffee and viticulture and alternative enterprises on chocolate and, veggies and those kind of things as well. Really important point you might have heard a couple of times over the last 2 days is we want to have a big future focus and talk about urban careers, really spotlight that and go from why would you do ag to why wouldn't you do ag. And so promoting the full range of careers involves, talking about past students and the whole you can't be it if you can't see it thing. These are actual past students. So Will up the top right's working as the chief engineer for Swarm Farm Robotics. He graduated in 2011. Ash on the left did internship at Four Pines Brewery at Brookvale. So we made a little 5-minute video about his journey through ag degree and doing that, and examples of a metropolitan career. You might have seen this before as well. It's a CSU kind of career options in agriculture chart, and it shows, it's really quite powerful because it shows that the on-farm jobs really only represent a quarter of the top right. All the other options are non-farm jobs, and that's really important for getting metropolitan students involved. So what has that resulted in? Again, we get about 80 to 90 Year 12 students graduating with agriculture each year. And so we have about 5% of the students in New South Wales that do the agriculture HSC exam in one school. Around about 20-30% of those go on to do ag-related uni degrees, which, as I said before, there's only 1,500 that go into ag-related uni degrees each year. And so that's 1.5% of the national intake of students going into ag uni degrees, which we're very proud of, but it's not, we're one school, like it shouldn't be that high. There's around about 3,000 high schools in Australia, so it should be much, much lower for us. AgriFutures, sponsor of this event, has a fantastic Horizon Scholarship each year, and they give out around about 20 to 22 Horizon Scholarships to academically gifted uni students in third year, and we had this year 3 of the 22 were former students who graduated in 2020. So that they're doing really well academically, and they will be fantastic leaders in the future, having taught them. They're fantastic people. So to kind of get towards the end, why metropolitan and why secondary? Well, 90% of Australians live in an urban environment, and 65% or so live in just 5 cities. So if we exclude metropolitan people, that's the majority of our population. And that's a major loss for agriculture if we don't include those people. In New South Wales, 2/3 of the population live in Sydney, but only 1/3 of the HSC Ag students are in Sydney. So that's the wrong way around. Rural and regional students are already way overrepresented, and we need to make progress in metropolitan areas with metropolitan students doing agriculture. And I think secondary is where career decisions are made. So what appeals to metropolitan students about agriculture? I've mentioned a few of these, but we need to make it a subject that they know can help them make a difference in the world, because students, especially academically gifted students, want to do something that makes a difference in the world. And agriculture is absolutely one of the best ways they can do that. We need to make it a subject that they can be proud of doing amongst their peers and not be put down for. And I think that's absolutely possible. They need to see people ahead of them going into agriculture and see that someone like them doing it. And we need to normalise ag. And I think one of the things we do, there's a lot of talk about paddock to plate, but I think what we really do is plate to paddock. Like, you start with what's concrete, everyone knows about the plate, and you work backwards to what is more abstract. I'm going to skip that. This breaks all the rules of slides. There's way too much text, so I apologise for that, but it's really important stuff. So as part of my literature review, I've found this paper. It was a study done in Europe, in a couple of countries in Europe, about, it's called Alien or Alike, and how the perceived similarity between science teachers, particularly physics teachers, and the students' own image of themselves correlates with when they choose subjects or not. And it's actually super important, because as the bit in the red says there, students' image of science teachers can influence their academic choices. So, I think if I say physics teachers, everyone can kind of think, oh yeah, I know what a physics teacher's like. Or maybe an art teacher, or they're all maybe similar stereotype. With physics, maybe they're a bit aloof, a bit weird, a bit awkward. Apologies if there's any physics teachers in here, but this paper and this study says that students then don't see themselves, their own image of themselves, matching up with that of the teacher, and they don't pick physics for that reason. And my suggestion, and it says in here that this is particularly the case with less frequent and less popular choice subjects, and I think that's agriculture. And I think we, a lot of ag teachers maybe play up the farmer stereotype, and maybe what do students think about the ag teacher? They just think they're a farmer, and I'm not a farmer, so why would I do agriculture? So I think that's got a lot to say there as well. And so to finish up, I think we need disruption in agriculture. We need to create something new. We need to change the perception of agriculture in society as a whole in Australia, but it can be done in each individual school without that happening. Ideally, we need both, but it can be done in each individual school. Agriculture does not equal farming. Farming is part of agriculture, but agriculture is not just farming. And I think one of the problems in the sector, I hear this all the time, even with people who are talking about this issue, is that they use the word agriculture and farming interchangeably. They just say, they're talking about agriculture, and then they just drop in farming in the next sentence. And that is like kryptonite to a metropolitan kid. They just go, agriculture's farming, that's not for me. And so we have to use the terms properly, and farming is only a small percentage of the jobs in agriculture, and we need to change that image. And so what I think we need to create is a space that, in my opinion, doesn't really exist, which is that of the metropolitan agriculturalist. I think the students, as part of that, need to see role models that are like them. They need to see examples of careers, particularly in city, for metropolitan students, but that can be a gateway to them then moving regionally. And we had a student who's just graduated from UN in Armidale. She has moved down to Wagga to do AI and ET technician, and she didn't start off thinking, hey, I'm going to move regionally, but she just loved it, and that's what she decided in the end. But the gateway is seeing careers in agriculture and seeing someone like them doing those roles. And so I think we need to inspire students, and particularly their parents, who are their gatekeepers, to allowing them to do subjects, especially in year 11 and 12 when it gets more serious. We need to inspire them to see a future in agriculture. And so to finish up, last slide, with creating something new, I think what we do is on the left. I think we do this pretty well. The current image of ag is really what 30% of the jobs are. This is the perception, I think, in metropolitan students' minds. It's only on farm, rural jobs, feels like the past. Maybe it's walking cows around a paddock because I see them posting stuff on Facebook about shows and stuff, and that's it. And then why do ag? Are you going to be a farmer? I think we do that really well on the left. But the reality is the other 70% of jobs are just unknown or unrepresented to metropolitan students in particular, and society more broadly. And we need to do this on the right, I think. And that's what agriculture actually is, which is a place where you can make a difference. It's high tech, it's science, there's heaps of jobs. Many of them are city-based. Having students challenged academically, and they know that it's academically challenged, and having them knowing why ag is important. I think what we need to create is what's on the right. And so thanks for listening. My first PhD paper, which has been published, is on the right there, which you're welcome to read if you want. It's called Untapped Potential, the Neglected Urban Interest in Secondary Agriculture, but thanks for listening.